Welcome back to Kettlebells and Cocktails. This is another Focus on Female episode, and I am so excited to have one of my close friends and also expert in the field of all things sort of like women and fitness in various stages of life. Christina Prevett is here. How are you doing? Welcome.
I'm doing so good. I'm so excited to be talking about this, and I always love the chance to catch up with you. So it's the best excuse
Same.
ever.
I could do 100 Focus on Female episodes with you alone and all of the different things that you are working on in your research and in your work and in your kind of like focusing on women in different aspects of life. Can you, before we dive into what we're going to be talking about today, which is mainly women in training during the pregnancy, postpartum type phases of life, can you just give a big overview on all of the amazing work that you're doing, please?
Yeah.
Because it's all
So,
epic.
so I'm an internal pelvic floor physical therapist by background. I've been a PT for about 10 years. And I have kind of two areas that I am specializing in. And one is the pregnancy postpartum space, pelvic health space. And then the other space is in geriatrics. So I recently completed my PhD on high load resistance training for at risk older adults, with the idea being that many of our older adults, many of our masters athletes, not in the CrossFit space, but outside of the CrossFit space, tend to get messages that are very fearful around strength training or impact. Don't run anymore. It's bad for your knees. You should try swimming. Let's not lift this heavy weight. You could hurt yourself. Like you're going to cause arthritis. All of these very fear invoking messages that over time start to create this fear of movement or thought that intensity is bad in exercise. And my PhD looked at, can we do high load training with individuals in their 70s, 80s, and 90s with the beginnings of frailty on board to push against that narrative? While I was doing my PhD, I got pregnant twice, actually. And
Nice. Perfect timing.
perfect. Yeah, exactly. Perfect timing. And when I was pregnant, I was a competitive weightlifter. I had just come off of competing at nationals in Canada, not any high level, like, but I was happy to be there.
That's pretty high level for what it's worth. It
And
is.
and when I was weightlifting, people were telling me that I was gonna be doing all this harmful things, or do you think this is good for the baby? And various aspects of that. And my PhD brain was like, now I need to look at what the research is showing in resistance training. And it was legitimately seated exercise or using a TheraBand for exercise for our pregnant individuals. And it was worse than our geriatric prescriptions. Like it was less dosage than our older adults were getting, who were frail, who were having all of these complexities. And so I ended up sending an email out to Margie Davenport, who is a very well known researcher. I'm so thankful for her to answering my random email saying, I have this idea. And that kind of started this whole secondary research aim for me, which was looking at high load resistance training during pregnancy. And so now that I'm on the other side of my PhD, I'm trying to figure out, and there's still a lot of ducks that need to go into a row, but how can we look at pelvic floor dysfunction, physical function during big swings in the female lifespan? Because we know that pelvic floor dysfunction increases when there's huge changes. So high estrogen, that's puberty, that's pregnancy; low estrogen, that's postpartum, and that's menopause. And that's where we see the highest rates of pelvic floor issues come in the female lifespan. And so the recommendations are often don't do anything of impact, don't lift heavy weights. But we know that strength is protective. We know that being strong is helpful. We know that down the road, me as an 80-year-old, I want to have as much muscle on my frame so that I can be as independent as I want to be when I'm 80, 90, hopefully 100. And I'll be like in one of those blue zones, like the new Netflix show.
Hell yeah. That's right. So
And
many sweet potatoes in your future. So
yeah,
many.
so many. I know. I loved it. I loved it. But, so how do we look at that interaction, and then how do we create this narrative that doesn't sweep pelvic floor dysfunction under the rug, but rather gives you navigational buoys? How do we tell you what are the signs and symptoms to look out for? How do we modify or amend the way that you are exercising if you are experiencing these things? and switch this narrative from an empowerment focused message where pelvic floor dysfunction is just like a cranky elbow. If we're doing a lot of exercise, we know who to go to, what to do when we're experiencing those symptoms, but it's not the message of you shouldn't have been doing that in the first place. And like, shame on you for doing this exercise because you're going to cause all of these permanent, long lasting issues. So, really just trying to change the narrative and realizing that the research wasn't there threw me down this path of if the research isn't there, then I need to help create it.
That's right.
Oof.
That's right. And what I love about you doing that is from a personal perspective, when I was pregnant with my son, I had nowhere to turn that was a medical professional who could give me information about what I was doing in terms of my choice for fitness, which is CrossFit, which means high heart rate stuff, which means high load stuff, resistance training, all the above. And there are lots of resources that exist, right? There are websites you can Google and training programs that exist even within our CrossFit space that are pregnancy and postpartum focused. That is true. But I was really frustrated at 10 different websites telling me 10 different things. And I wanted just to be able to say, I have a medical professional in my life who has given me this advice. And I know that a million different people will tell me a million different things, but I'm choosing to believe my one. That is what I needed with so many different messages and so many different things going on in my brain. I needed like my OB or a nurse midwife or a fucking doula who's fit. I needed one person to be able to be my resource and be the person that I could ask and trust and not go to Google because when you are pregnant and you have questions and you go to Google, you might as well gouge your eyes out. Like it's terrible and everything is going to kill you and your baby. So like just don't Google things. It's
Yeah.
better to have a resource. So that's why I'm so thrilled that you've been doing this work and I'm sorry to you too that it came out of frustration of also not having the information available when you needed it. But now that you've been devoting this time and effort and energy into bringing all of this information together through research and science and through your medical background as well, you've developed what I'm so excited to talk more about today, which is the Barbell Mamas.
Yeah. So you're right. You can look at 10 different programs and they can have 10 different prescriptions.
Mhm.
And I think the important part is when you are trying to sell a program to a pregnant person, you have to cater it to the lowest common denominator because and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but I mean when you're trying to go to the masses, the nuance of it depends just doesn't exist because you're not there in front of that person, right? You're not the medical provider in the same room with a person that is able to say, "Oh, like this is it, but your deadlift is 300 pounds, so maybe we can move from a 55-pound bar to a 95-pound bar, and you would be okay with that in your pregnancy at this stage for you." And so it can be extremely frustrating and recognizing too that in pregnancy, it is such a protected time in a female's life. The consequence of something going wrong is dire. And so we tend to have this knee-jerk reaction to be very conservative. So I don't mean to infer that there isn't a reason why we tend to be conservative. And it's important to know that research takes time
Mhm.
because we've really only in the last 10 years seen this huge boom in strength-based sport that is pushing researchers to have this need to create this research. And so I recognize that that takes time. And the Barbell Mamas came out of how do I put it depend into a research or into a exercise program?
Yeah.
And so we have pregnant and postpartum programs for CrossFit, weightlifting, and powerlifting. And instead of saying, this is your week, this is what you're going to do, or here's my general lower prescription for what I think most people are going to be able to do, we provided filters and specific pregnancy filters and specific postpartum filters. The idea being, here's the program for the day. If you are 12 weeks pregnant, we're going to try or in the first trimester, this is where we're going to put you. If you are later in your pregnancy, and I just said later, I didn't say second, I didn't say third, because later for some people is 38 weeks. and later for other people is 18. And none of those are wrong. Then here is some modifications for you later on in pregnancy, or if baby bump is starting to get in the way. Because again, baby may start to get in the way at the bottom position of a clean at 20 weeks for some people, and for others, it's 40. And then we did filters for things like pelvic pain. Like a lot of individuals during pregnancy start to have SI joint or hip pain and say, okay, here's the program. But if you are experiencing this pain, here's how I want you to modify it.
Mhm.
And so the idea was that we weren't going to get this underdose prescription for these people where they don't feel like they are doing anything in the gym, but we're also being respectful of the way that the body changes during pregnancy. And then similarly, postpartum, we have some people who are going to start our postpartum exercise program at 4 weeks, and others who are not going to have the chance to get into the gym, even if they wanted to, until 16, 18, 6 months postpartum. So it's going to be very different day one for a person who's 4 weeks postpartum than a person who's 18 weeks postpartum, even though it may be their first day in the gym. And so we have filters for that. So our postpartum programs have a early postpartum filter, a C-section filter, a leaking filter, a heaviness filter, a diastasis recti filter. So if you are struggling with any of these things that are common, especially early on postpartum, here's the program, but here's what I want you to do for you. Because we had so many people who were saying, I feel like I'm bugging my coaches because I feel like I always need modification. My coaches don't have training in what it means to be postpartum. They've never had to modify for a person who's just had a baby, and they felt very lost or they felt vulnerable because
Mhm.
they didn't know if what they were doing was right for them. So the idea was to try and cater to as many people as possible and give them the answer to it depends within kind of these buoys with the program.
The program is not easy.
Yeah.
Like, you are not taking it easy on any of the women in any stage of life. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that sometimes that is just like it's just a massive misconception. And it is also one of the problems that I had when I was like, I don't want to stop working hard. I don't want to stop heavy breathing. I don't want to stop pushing to I'm not going to be at 90% of my max, but I'd like to be at 70. I'd like to be at 80. I'd like to feel sore in my muscles. Is that okay? And I will never forget the first time I asked my nurse at my last OB's office, and she was like, "We really recommend pregnant women not lift more than about 25 pounds." And I was like, maybe 9 weeks ish. And I had literally just the day before clean and jerked like 165 pounds and felt amazing. Didn't put a belt on, but I was like, I think that I still feel good about this, which for me is big girl weight. Not for everyone listening, for the wonderful Olympic lifters. But for me, that was like, I'm pushing it, you know what I mean? And I still feel good. So, can you just talk a little bit about the choices that you made in your programming and why that is still something that you're recommending women in those stages of life, if and when it feels good?
Yeah. Are you speaking to pregnancy or postpartum, or do you want me to tackle both?
Let's hear both. Let's
Okay.
hear both. Yeah.
Yeah. So for pregnancy, we're starting to have more and more research that things like the heart rate restrictions that used to be really common of don't let your heart rate go over 140 beats per minute are not realistic.
Oh, is it
If
140?
honestly walking upstairs,
Whoops.
right? Like,
Yeah, I'm like,
yeah,
that's
I
me
know.
like looking at a piece of cake. Is that what it really was? Oh,
Yeah.
dang. Okay.
So where a lot of these things came from was that the recommendation was to stay at moderate intensity. And that was where you wanted to go, but we didn't have any research in high intensity. So
Right.
220 minus our age is for first pregnancy average age now is about 30. So that's 190. 190 times zero point 0.6, zero point 0.7 in that moderate range, you're in this 140. And then this bad case of
LOL.
and then the bad case of telephone happened. And now it's like, absolutely do not go above that.
Right,
Right.
right.
So, and so that's how these recommendations, I think, really took hold. And we had one research study that saw blips on fetal ultrasound when women were at a 90+% of their VO2 max, these elite endurance athletes. There wasn't a control group. We didn't know if that fetal tracing was something that if we watched baby on mom's belly the entire day, if they would see these things, but it was enough to cause us to be more cautious. And then since then, we now have more research that a systematic review on vigorous intensity exercise in the third trimester. And now what we're starting to see is that actually baby's heart rate will go up just as not as much as mom's, but it'll go up when mom is exercising. When her heart rate goes up, baby's heart rate goes up, and it's starting to show some signs of cardiac conditioning in baby. So it's like mom's getting fitter, but also your baby's getting fitter too, which is cool. Like we've almost seen this big shift. And so when I was designing the pregnant programs, I wanted to be able to make these individuals who love exercising in these ways still feel like they're exercising in this way.
Mm.
Because oftentimes you feel like you're modifying everything. You're used to pushing it in the gym, and now everybody's telling you not to. And you're feeling guilty that you hate it.
Yeah.
So many moms feel guilty that they hate it. Everyone's like, "Oh, but you're gonna get this sweet baby." It's like, "Yes, but I loved this part of myself." This
Yeah.
was something that I looked forward to every day. I worked so hard to be able to snatch this weight, and now you're telling me to take snatches out of my program. And so we tried to be very mindful of saying, "This is where, like, these are signs that you shouldn't be doing this. But if you don't have those signs, here's ways for you still to get a training stimulus to keep your body strong. And that'll set you up so much better in the postpartum period than this deconditioning that we have." And we're going to have some loss of muscle mass, and we're going to have some deconditioning for sure. And then there's so many things that come up in pregnancy that are outside of our control.
Like
But if we
cankles. Mm.
like cankles, yeah, 100%.
Mm.
But for example, my Olympic weightlifters, people get told to stop snatching. And just put out a podcast episode about ways to modify the Olympic weightlifts during pregnancy. But I need able to hold weight over their head in their shoulders,
Mhm.
like not even talking about core and pelvic floor. So we may not be snatching because you're going to just do this big loop around the bar. It's not going to be that great from a performance perspective, but I can absolutely get you tempo overhead squatting right up until delivery. I
For
can
sure.
absolutely get you to be doing snatch balances to keep that upper body strength. Because what we're starting to see postpartum is that while, yes, there are some pelvic issues, for example, with runners, one of their biggest issues is that their lower body gets injured, and it's like shin splints and knee
Mhm.
pain. It's not I'm leaking where it may be for some, but everyone's like, my ankles are really sore because we've taken that impact away from them for so long that when they're starting to get back into it, the rest of their body is also not used to it. In
Right.
CrossFit, it's stop doing all gymnastics. Okay, but then their grip sucks.
Mhm.
And it
Mhm.
takes so long to get your grip back. And so it has nothing to do with your core. It's that you physically cannot hold on to the bar anymore. So how can we keep you hanging from the bar, respecting where you are during your pregnancy to still get that strengthening that you need for your sport and do that into the postpartum period? So really have tried to keep the great side of it, like the strengthening side of it there, and being mindful of where you are. So we do that with giving options for later pregnancy, giving suggested weights, and then being aware that people are going to move within those navigational buoys, and then giving them signs and symptoms to look out for. For example, in pregnancy, I feel like I'm going on a tangent here. I'm
No, bring it
sorry.
on.
All right.
I
Like
love it.
in pregnancy, like lying on your back, right? People say don't ever lie on your back. This is for something called supine hypotensive syndrome, where as baby comes out of your pelvis, it can put compression on one of the blood supplies, and it could affect blood supply to the baby. You are going to feel that in exercise. So I have some people who, as soon as they start warming up with an unweighted glute bridge, they're pregnant and they start to feel dizzy. I have other people that can stay through an entire pelvic floor exam, 30, 40 minutes on their back, and they're totally fine. And so, for example, with bench press, we don't take bench press out of a pregnant program. We do it all the way up until delivery. But we say, if you are feeling unwell, dizzy, it does not feel good on your body today, I'm going to get you to go up to an incline and take the percentage down because you can't lift the same in an incline bench press as you can on a flat bench, especially if you haven't trained it. So here's the program. But if for your pregnancy, this does not feel great, Here's the option. And so we don't have to get rid of it.
I love those really specific markers to look out for and really specific ways to modify because what I hated hearing was, "Oh, your body will tell you when you need to pull back." And I'm like, "Bitch, I've been CrossFitting for over a decade. I have trained my body and my brain to do nothing but push through every red flag that I should be pulling back."
Yeah.
That like and that's what my original OB told me where she was like, you'll know when to throttle it down." And I'm like, "Bro, all my athlete brain knows to do is be like, 'Oh no, I can't breathe. You know what? I can do 10 more.'"
Oh,
And
yeah.
that is not like a very specific thing to look out for or a feeling to look out for or a type of pain to look out for. So I really do love you guys nailing down like, "Hey, in this position, you may feel X, Y, or Z. Do this instead."
Yeah.
And not
Yeah.
just generally like, if you don't feel like it, just do less weight. Like that we need more when we are in those moments of life because there's not a lot of going back to our way original point, like there's not a lot of layman's terms out there for like all I had ever heard was like, "Don't lay on your back, you could kill the baby." Like, okay, great. That doesn't make any sense to me. But for someone to be like, "It could this nerve and it cuts off blood supply, and you might start feeling dizzy, or you might start feeling pain right here, or you might whatever," like those really specific, what am I even gonna call them? Feelings or symptoms, those really specific symptoms when you're doing an athletic movement, there's nowhere that that resource exists. Like a
Yeah.
glute bridge might make you feel this kind of thing that could be dangerous, or a bench press might make you feel this kind of thing that could be dangerous. All I ever heard was don't sleep on your back.
Yeah. And we know too that most people aren't gonna be symptomatic, most people until about 7 minutes in. And so,
Oh,
again,
that's
we now have
interesting.
yeah, because it just takes that time, like, you're not completely blocking off blood supply, it's just putting pressure there, and where baby moves and the position of your body and how long your torso is, how big baby is, all of those things are going to influence it, and so not everybody experiences this. But we want to be mindful that this could be something that happens. And again, now we have a systematic review that said that there wasn't any adverse events when women decided to exercise on their back during pregnancy. However, these are things to look out for so that you know when your body is sending that signal that this is too much for you. And the other thing that we really wanted to add on was around pain
Mm,
because when individuals are pregnant and they start experiencing pelvic pain, either whether it's at their pubic symphysis, like that joint in the front, like right by your crotch, or in the back where we would describe those two S. A lot of times people say it'll get better when the baby's born. And you're like, that's great. I'm 16 weeks pregnant. I'm not even big yet. And now you're spiraling, right? Saying, oh
mhm.
my gosh, this is going to get so bad. Like, should I stop working out? All those types of things. And we know exercise can be so helpful. And we know that getting into the gym and doing things that doesn't hurt is going to help with that pain. And that was the same thing. We tried to give you a program that respected, okay, if your pelvis is not feeling good right now, here are ways for you to still exercise in a way that's respecting that pain and really helping you get through it. Cause some of the things I'm like, I'm not getting you to modify because this is really great for helping with pelvic pain. Like it's a strengthening exercise. We put in accessory movements that are aiming to help with strength around the hips because our hips widen and we have a lot more range of motion than we had before because of that circulating hormone to get ready for birth. And that's something that is really, really important. The last feature of the program that we're really proud of and we really try and make an important part is that we put in what we call birth prep workouts. So one of the things that we see a lot with our CrossFitters is that they are very good at tightening up their pelvic floor when they are trying to hold their breath so that they can lift heavy weights. When you are pushing baby out, you are holding your breath and having to relax your pelvic floor, which is the exact opposite
Right.
of our training.
Yeah.
that takes some time to unlearn, and trying to unlearn it while your body is in a contraction during delivery is not that time. We put it in every week, and we say, like, I want you to prioritize this as if it was any other Metcon, and it is 10 to 12 minutes of putting your body into a position where your pelvic floor is more relaxed or more lengthened, and focusing on breathing and trying those holding your breath, but relaxing the pelvic floor, so that hopefully we don't have an issue where baby isn't progressing vaginally. Because we can see some individuals end up with a C-section for failure to progress, where baby is just not descending. And for some of our barbell athletes, our thoughts, and again, we don't have research into this is just clinically what we see is, if we don't know how to relax, we can try to breathe out as we're going through contractions, but we know that's only 50-50 because we just tend to be stronger with the breath hold. We can end up kind of delaying our own progress in delivery. And so one of the other features of the Barbell Mamas programming is these birth workouts, birth prep workouts that are very much aimed at trying to relax and get you to unlearn some of that Valsalva, so that during your big D day, you can rely on that. And it takes time to learn that.
Oh, yeah. I had so I saw pelvic floor PT while I was pregnant, and I had that where she was, like, all up in my junk, and she was like, "Wow, your muscles are really tight down here," and I was like, "Thank you. I'm so
Almost
strong."
down.
And she was like, "No, no, we need to work on this." And it was really interesting because she had me hooked up to some, like, electrodes that could
Mhm.
sense whether or not my muscles were tight or loose, and, like, messed with different positions, like laying on my side, one knee up, on my back, knees open, knees shut, whatever, and like trying to find the position where I was the least amount of tense with all my pelvic floor muscles. And the idea was like maybe you could deliver on your side because that could be, and then like all hell goes that all everything goes to shit when you're in the middle of it and you're like, I don't, just give me a goddamn epidural. I'll lay where however you want me to. Make it happen. But it was really interesting to learn that, and to learn, to your point, like the ways I needed to put my body and the things that I needed to try to do in order to relax that part of my musculature, which I truly did not even know existed until that part of my life. And then trying to re-strengthen it again after the fact.
Yeah.
Also
And
wild.
yeah, and our pelvic floor is a reflexive system. Like, we shouldn't really be thinking about our pelvic floor, and we only do when either something goes wrong and we're peeing or pooping when we don't want to be. We're pregnant and people tell us that we're going to ruin our pelvic floor, so we become
Mm.
aware of it. Or postpartum, when we're starting to retrain and get into exercise and movement again. That kind of bridges us into our postpartum program. There's a lot of like very general kind of foundational work that people focus on in the postpartum period. Like, there's a lot of programs that you can get that focus on breathing and trying to do some gentle contractions of our core and some gentle movements of our body, and they're all phenomenal. Like, I this is not against any of that, but the bridge between doing TA contractions on our back and being able to get back to muscle ups is one that is hard for a lot of athletes. They don't have that guidance. We can say go to pelvic floor PT, but pelvic floor PT is expensive. It's worth it, but I recognize that not everyone is going to have access to that, whether it's not
Right.
geographically ready, like not available for them, whether they have a provider that knows their sport, the cost, health insurance, like their baby, and if they can get out of the house, like there's telemedicine options, but like there is known barriers. And so these programs can be really wonderful to try and build foundations. But I am a person who believes that outside of the first couple of weeks, there is a lot of pelvic floor and core rehab that we can do that also looks like the sport that you want to participate in. We are getting a lot of core training when we are doing some of the movements in CrossFit. And so our Barbell Mamas postpartum rehab program looks a lot like getting back into these movements. And then we add in some extra core work and some pelvic floor connection work in those programs. because that's what we want that core strength for everyday life, but also for our fitness journey. And so a lot of people think that they're going to come into day one of this program and they're going to be doing, glute bridges and things like that. And they may do it as accessories, but day one, week one is like empty barbell. And we're going to start getting into snatch patterns and like overhead and we're going to start hanging from the bar and working on breathing. And can we contract our core and still breathe while we're holding up from the bar? What's the thing that feels like it's the hardest? Is it your grip? Is it your shoulders? Is it your core? And again, we have these filters. If you're early postpartum, here's how we're going to take this impact down to respect tissue healing, because we can't work around that. Like it takes a certain amount of time for our vagina and our core to heal after having delivered. But in order for our bodies to heal, we have to stress those tissues. And so this idea of not doing anything, um, we're starting to get more research to show that doing 6 weeks of doing nothing is not going to protect potentially our pelvic floor, and then it's just so unrealistic for moms who have other kids at home or people that don't have maternity leave, or like there's so many different examples where people are going back to work at 4 to 6 weeks postpartum. Like entrepreneurs don't have maternity leave. That doesn't exist for us. Like I started treating 3 weeks postpartum, and trust me, my core was not exactly ready to be holding other people's limbs, but I had started exercising at 2 weeks postpartum, so at least I had something. Like there's just we want to create this bridge. And so the idea of our postpartum programs is how do we give you programming that makes you feel like you are setting yourself up to get back to your community? And that is the most important thing for our moms. That's what they need, right? They need their tribe around them. Postpartum feels so lonely. It can feel so overwhelming. Your life changes so immediately. And if you have a program that you can do alongside the class that respects where your healing is, but you also have all your friends and your coach is holding your baby and you just have that osmosis of energy from everyone around you, I think it can just be so magical.
Yeah.
So that was the idea.
And very healing. Like, so many of us are in the gym being active as a form of therapy. And that's sort of like another hat that you guys wear as the leaders of this program that is sort of unofficial, right? And I think all of us who step into a gym, and even myself as a CrossFit coach, like sort of unofficially wear that therapist hat because we really respect that. We're in the gym to like look good, feel good, be healthy, live to 100, blah, blah, blah. But also because it does something for our mental health to just feel, right? Feel the difficulty of the movements, feel accomplished when we're in there doing things that hitting goals and but also like literally feel the endorphins that come from being active. It's also important. So in a period of time where you are maybe lost or maybe overwhelmed or maybe in a lot of physical and mental pain depending on your situation, like having the opportunity to come back to something that you know and love and to be around like-minded people, I think can be the most healing. The best thing I ever did for myself when I had postpartum anxiety, like, really, really bad. The best thing that I did for myself was sign up for one of those dorky new mom groups, which I, like, totally did not think was going to be my jam. Like, that's not the kind of mom that I really am, is, like, sitting in a circle with other new moms and kind of, like, commiserating about how crazy we all feel. But it was the most wonderful healing thing that I could have done because I instantly did not feel like a crazy pants. I was like, "Oh my god, we're all freaking out about the binky hitting the floor." Like, it's not just me, and it's not just me mentality is, I think, what truly humanizes us because it allows you to feel a part of something greater, which makes your individual concerns feel so much smaller and more manageable. So I do think
Yeah.
that that element of community that you guys are building is so important. And how does that work? Like when someone wants to like be a part of Barbell Mamas, like do they get access to you and your brain and knowledge and wealth of information on this stuff? How does it all work?
Yeah, so we have a Facebook group that individuals can use, but I'll be honest, most people are interacting with us through our app. So you can message us directly if you have any questions. And I've had plenty of times where people are emailing me or, sorry, video messaging me through the app. and saying like, does this look normal? Like, how does my abs look with this? Like, is this something that I need to be worried about? And I can do a quick check and say, no, everything looks good. Or that maybe like you're pushing it a little bit too much. Try this cue and this cue, and then send me another video and let's see. And those types of things can be really, really helpful to just have that peace of mind, right? We want to know that we are being safe, and we want to feel supported that we are doing the right thing. And that was really where the Barbell Mamas came from, is how can I have somebody in my corner that is going to guide me in a way that makes me feel safe, that makes me feel
Mhm.
empowered, that I know that I am doing the thing that I love, but I'm doing it in a way that's going to respect where my body is healing this time. And so that's been really wonderful to be able to be that person for individuals and do it in a way that is more cost effective for many people who may have that financial challenge of being able to see a provider. And then I also, because of all of the work that I do teaching in this space to other PTs, the other thing is great is I get to be this conduit. And someone's like, oh, like this is a little bit too much. I was like, this might be where we go and see a pelvic PT if you
Yeah.
can. Where are you located? Let me click into my network and see if there's somebody that I know does pelvic health, but also knows your sport and
Mhm.
would be able to guide you. And for clinicians, a lot of them have used the Barbell Mamas and said, like, here's a couple of programs. Like, you are a
Cool.
CrossFitter, you want to do this. Like, here's things that you can follow. Like, I can do your checks around where you are from a healing perspective. And then here's the program that you can follow it, your home exercise program to get you back to your
Cool.
gym. Yeah, because
No,
one of the
I
cool things
no, you go ahead. No, you go.
one of the things from our research study that was looking at women who continued to lift heavy during their pregnancy is that they did have lower rates of postpartum anxiety and depression
Mhm.
compared to our general national norms. So I think you hit on something completely. Like, I can't say that it's the resistance training, especially when you're working with a group of CrossFitters, because it was probably the move your body in combination with getting to move your body with friends.
Yeah.
Because that connection piece, you're right, is just so, so important.
Yeah. I cannot even begin to stress the value of having a resource that you know and trust throughout that stage of life because I just I have already said it, but I'll say it again. Like it is so frustrating not knowing where to turn when you have really serious questions about like, can I do this? Is this okay? Am I at the stage yet where I'm doing a thing that is a like I'll use coning as an example, even though that in and of itself is like
Whole other
controversial these
conversation.
days, right, yeah, but, like, am I presenting pressure in a way that could potentially be disruptive to my goals right now? And I don't know. I remember, like, hanging off a bar being like, "Matt, is my am I coning?" And he was like, "I don't know, your belly's kinda, like, moving from one thing to another," and he's like, "Do you see it?" And I'm like, "I don't know, do you see it?" It was just so awkward, like, you've never been through it before, you don't know what you're doing, and again, when you Google it, you get 10 different answers. So, like, the validity of having just a single resource that you have just decided, like, you drew your line in the sand, like, "This is the program I'm following, and this is the coach that I'm talking to, and I'm gonna do what she says because she's a professional in X, Y, and Z ways." Like, that security around your decision making in a time of your life where everything else is kind of, like, out of your control, including what your body's doing, is so invaluable, and I actually think I mean, anything and everything can happen postpartum, right? Because hormones are a bitch and no one can control how that goes. But I do think you can do the most possible to set yourself up for success on the back end. And there's
Yeah.
like a lot to be said for staying nice and even keeled in terms of your mental health going into your delivery. And if working out is one of those things that helps you be there, you got to do it. And doing it without additional freakouts. Like, "Oh god, can I be doing this? Should I even still be doing toes to bar? Rowing hurts. Why does that happening? Like, what else can I do? Did I work out too hard? Did I push it too hard? Did I ruin something? Did I break something?" Like, these are real questions that you have throughout 40 weeks because you can't help it because you have, like, a precious life that you're trying to facilitate, but you still have your own life that you're trying to facilitate. It is an impossible ask.
I
It
know, it's so
really
hard.
is.
And That's why the Barbell Mamas podcast started. One day
Mhm.
I was sitting and I was just thinking about, I'm like, I'm going to brainstorm the questions that mamas have during pregnancy and postpartum related to CrossFit, pregnancy, weightlifting. And I sat there for about 40 minutes and I came up with 80 questions.
I could
And
probably
it
come
was
up
just
with
like,
80 questions in
right. I
this
was like,
moment.
right. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to do a podcast
You
because
have
I
to.
was like, how can I help control the messaging and give a place where all of the things that you wanna know, I am trying to answer for you to the best of my ability. Like, how when do you go back to bracing? When can you go back to using a weightlifting belt? Like, when do I have to kick that out during pregnancy? Can I exercise before 6 weeks? I'm going stir crazy. Like,
Mhm.
all of these things, and we we tried to create this podcast that's not catered to the clinician because I feel like there's a lot of podcasts that give really great information to clinicians, but the language can sometimes be too high for somebody who doesn't have that medical background. The idea with the Barbell Mamas podcast was, how do I talk to the person that is in my room, treatment room, pregnant? Like, what would I say to her if she was asking me these questions? And that was the filter that we took through for the Barbell Mamas podcast. And it has been, we're still new. We're only like 20 episodes in, but it has been really wonderful, the reception that people have had saying, "This is so helpful to get this information," and it felt like something that needed more long form, because to hear my voice and to say, "You are safe," like around
Mhm.
C-section, for example, "If you are feeling this way, know that you are not alone, you are safe, and I am here to give you the information and give you the guidance to hopefully make you feel a little bit better."
I am obsessed with your podcast. I
You're so
love everything about the Barbell Mamas podcast. And I tell you what, when I first turned it on, I was like, I don't know how like a solo podcast is going to be in my ears for 30 minutes because most of the podcasts that I listen to are like two people, sometimes even three people going back and forth on a topic. And I was like, wow, Christina can carry 45 minutes on her own, and I am like, I'm gripping my steering wheel because I only listen to podcasts in the car, and I'm like hanging on every friggin' word you're saying, and I'm like, wow, she hasn't even stopped talking for 40 minutes. I bet she's tired. Because when I record podcasts, I'm like, sometimes I go on some sort of diatribe, and then John talks, and I'm like, whoo, I'm sweating. How long have I been talking for? And it's crazy because what I love about your show is even the topics that don't really apply to me are so fascinating that I am truly hanging off of every word. Like I did just listen
Oh,
to
thank you.
your weightlifting and powerlifting modifications during pregnancy, which truly does not apply to me as a CrossFitter, but it was so interesting to hear the different things that you do or recommend to women who are in those positions and also even to hear part of your backstory as a weightlifter when you were in that competition mode of your life and the personal reasons you can bring to the table of some of the things that you tried and worked or didn't work or why you did or didn't do it or why you wouldn't make those recommendations for people moving forward. That's really fascinating. So that
I'm
is
so
that is
glad.
just so great. I love
One of the
everything
things
about
I
it.
thought, I was like, does anybody want to listen to me for 30 minutes?
Oh, yeah, I do. Are you kidding me? You're so eloquent too, and I do love that you make the language totally digestible because I'm sure that there's a lot in there that you could easily like ratchet up to some like medical level, and I'm just over there being like, yeah, my butt hurts. Like I don't know, I don't know what the technical term is for that, but like I'm in pain. So what does it mean? So I love everything. I also think it would be a great resource for coaches. Really
Yeah.
solid if you have people who are going through different phases of their lives in your classes or in your gyms, the Barbell Mamas podcast can also be a really great resource for just like things to look out for, ways to modify, recommendations to make for women in different stages of life. Like it's really, really solid.
Yeah, we've had some people ask us about doing like programming and stuff for coaches.
Mhm.
That's just not really in the scope of what we want the Barbell Mamas to be. Like, we really want to support pregnant women to keep exercising and postpartum women to feel supported returning to exercise. And that's been our narrow focus. And then the podcast is trying to support individuals who are going through this area of their life and saying, how how do I also, when questions are popping up, even if it's questions with the program, can I give them an episode that I answer their question? But then I said, if you really want to deep dive into this, here's an episode that we did on this. You understand the reason behind why we are doing it. Because the other thing is that so many people are given these recommendations and then they aren't told why. And I am
Mhm.
never offended if somebody asks me why we put this amount of programming in. And sometimes we're wrong. Like there's times where I was like, this feels like it'll be great. Oh no, that was way too much or that was way too little. And then we modify. Like we're human. Like we don't, this is just something that is not even our full-time job. It's something that we do as a support because you're right. Like we always try and create these resources that we wish that we would have had.
Yeah.
And it's been wonderful. And I've been really loving it, and we try and bring on guests on the Barbell Mama, so you don't always just have to listen to me. I've been doing a lot of solo episodes lately
No,
because
I
there's been
love
a
it.
bunch of things that I want
Not
want to
love
get
it.
out there,
Please keep going with it. I'm obsessed with it, truly.
but it is, you know what? Our my solo episodes are doing markedly better than
Isn't it
the
interesting?
is
Do you know
interview.
why? It's because the second you become pregnant, if you're in our athletic space, you're Googling like
Everything.
resources for how do can I CrossFit and pregnant? Can I lift and pregnant? You know what I mean? Like, and there's no friggin' study out there that can just say yes. So people are looking for experts.
Yeah.
Wait, that was let me go back to, like, something you just said. How in the world are you making time for this? Because you do all the things, like, you have an actual job, and you are seeing patients, and you're also traveling and teaching, and you also have 2 kids.
Yeah, so I'm
Also,
not
you're really fit. You're also working out. Like, how are you doing
I'm
all of
just
this?
trying to fit all the things. So I'm not clinically treating right now. So I'm doing research. I teach with the Institute of Clinical Excellence, and then I have 2 kiddos at home and work out on my own. And but so really, my husband is the magic behind the Barbell Mamas that
Amazing.
nobody sees. So he does a lot of our editing for our videos and
Cool.
our stuff. So I just record the podcast and do the programming modifications and stuff. And he really is the logistical back end. So
Awesome.
there's a lot of times it's funny, we always joke that people think that they're talking to me about certain things, but it's not unless it's like a question that's specific to pelvic health that he'll toss it my way. So we call him the dad behind the Barbell Mamas. So I'm the mom behind the Barbell Mamas and he's the dad.
Oh, I
And so
love
the
it.
dad is doing a lot of the stuff in the background. But as a coach himself, like we've done when we had a brick and mortar business, we had a postnatal program and he's excellent at modifying and educating on the pelvic floor. It is just so phenomenal to see like the way that we can educate our coaches of either gender. This is not just a female
Yeah,
issue, not just like a female issue for pregnancy, postpartum, but also men have pelvic floor dysfunction too. Like I
totally.
talked about that with John when we were on that podcast before. And so, yeah, he's behind it and he helps a ton with like the logistics of it. So it allows us to do a lot more. And so we're really excited that we have some kind of projects coming up that I think will be really helpful for people. So
That's very
just loving
cool.
it.
I love that. I love that he's a part of it and supporting you and what you're doing, and also, like, yes, I absolutely think that it's not a women's only space. I do think that sometimes women may feel more comfortable with a female
Oh yeah.
coach or a female provider or a female clinician or something along those lines because and not only female, but also, like, potentially mom type person who has quite
Yeah.
literally lived through it in a sense. But I think the more people that we can educate and bring into the fold, the more opportunities we have to continue providing people the resources that they need. So the more the merrier. Bring it on.
Yeah, there is definitely no need for a scarcity mindset at all because there are plenty of people that need our help and not nearly enough providers or enough education.
Mhm.
And you're not going to be everybody's program. Like you're
Right.
not, and if you're trying to be everybody's program, then you're not going to do a good job. Like my expertise is really around barbell training and CrossFit training. Like that is my jam. It is what I love. It is what I've been doing for 10 years. It is where my research area is now. It's what I teach on. And so our programs are not for usually somebody going into trying to do a commercial gym program unless they're doing barbell specific stuff. Like we really have said like CrossFit, powerlifting, weightlifting, that is our niche. If you love those things, we are a support for you. And there's a ton of really amazing programs that speak to other areas of general fitness. And this is just where we put like the hill that we are putting our flag on around who we want to serve. And so, yeah, we niched in that way. And so it's cool because people are starting to know us for
Yeah.
that niche, which is
What and this is a loaded question, so take your time to think about it. But if there was one biggest misconception about training that style, barbell training, CrossFit, weightlifting during pregnancy, what do you think that is? What is the
oh,
biggest misconception? Oh, there's already an answer. Go ahead.
yeah. So everybody thinks that there is a safe or unsafe way of doing things,
Oh, that's
or that there
interesting.
are safe or unsafe exercises.
Okay.
And honestly, 5 year ago, Christina, 3 year ago, Christina would have said there are safer and unsafer options for barbell training. And I've really changed my tune on that. There is a option that is ready that you are ready for, and there is an option that you are not ready for. It is not safe versus unsafe. It is how do we match where you are during your pregnancy, during your life, in your fitness journey with the way your pelvic floor and core is feeling to the stimulus that I am trying to give you in this workout. Like I am trying to get your legs strong, but you're feeling pelvic pain and you are 35 weeks pregnant. How do I get your legs strong, recognizing that you are experiencing this? And that answer would probably be that I would keep a barbell on your back. I would get you going to a bench and I would add a tempo so that you're
Mhm.
doing 5 seconds on the way down, 5 seconds on the way up. So your quads are shaking, but we're not loading up your pelvis in a way that's going to flare up your symptoms, for
That
example.
sounds terrible, by the way.
That sounds terrible, right? But
Oof.
it's gonna get your legs strong and you're gonna be able to like, and then you're probably gonna have that good blood flow and your pelvis hopefully is going to feel better after you do that session. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, this idea that there is one way that is safe and one way that isn't is something that I would do. And then like a part B is like this weight restriction, that there is this global amount of weight restriction or way that we should be modifying from a percentage perspective that is going to cause you to have better outcomes postpartum. Because some people are just not going to feel good loading up really heavy in their pregnancy, but then the next person beside them is going to PR their deadlift at 38 weeks. For some reason, mass moves mass. So the deadlift
Oh, I
PR is
like
the
to
one we
say
stand the
ass
test.
moves mass, but yes. But my ass also got huge during pregnancy, so I was, like, trying to use it to my advantage, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who's 37 weeks pregnant with her third, and she just posted on Instagram that she deadlifted 265 for a triple. I was like, dang, you just took my
And,
vaccine.
yeah, that baby is probably gonna come out deadlifting more than me, so there you go.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah.
That's
So,
great, good
yeah,
for
so
her.
those weights too, right? Like it's what works for one person is not the other. And so comparing one journey to the other is not appropriate either. There is no safe, unsafe. There is what works for your body and your pregnancy and what works for other people in their pregnancy. And also your own pregnancies are going to be different. You may feel like you were able to do so much more in your first pregnancy and not in your second, or you felt really sick with your first. Now you feel better with your second. It's just different.
Yeah, it's really interesting something you said about not comparing the journey because I do think that that's, like, an unfortunate side effect of being in that phase of life is sometimes feeling really frustrated that you wanna do more and your provider's telling you not to, or sometimes you're feeling really frustrated that people are PRing their deadlift at 37 weeks and you don't feel well enough, or you just don't feel strong. Like, that could be another thing too, or that you don't even want to go work out and feeling bad about yourself that you don't I can't get to the gym and here's women PRing their shit. Here's Tia doing the most amazing epic shit on the planet at basically 40 weeks pregnant and I can't get off the couch and I'm only eating saltines. So I just feel like there's this comparison devil is just awful because here we are trying to facilitate an environment for women to make them feel supported in their journey. And it's like, for the most part, the women who really want to stay active, while we feel like we're in the majority because we live in this very insular CrossFit space, we are really in the minority in the rest of the world. But if you are a CrossFitting woman who gets pregnant and decides not to continue working out for whatever reason during your pregnancy, like that is totally the right move for you. how do you also not feel isolated within the community of Instagram where people are like snatching 1,000,000 pounds when they're halfway through their pregnancy? That's tough. That's really tough.
Yeah, it is, and I always laughed with, like, Tia because I was like, "You would never compare your fitness to Tia. Why would you compare
Never.
your, like, fitness?" Like, oh my and people in the comment section, I was like,
Ugh, it was
"Jesus."
dumpster fire in the comment
Oh,
section. Yeah,
yeah, I did
yeah,
a whole podcast episode on her too because I was like, "Listen, we need to clear some things up."
yeah.
We can't just have a conversation. Let's have a fireside chat about Tia Claire Toomey and why we should not be judging her and let her do her own fitness journey. And she has a ridiculous amount of fitness that is definitely going to perfect into her pregnancy and influence her postpartum journey as a professional athlete who does this for her job. We would never say to somebody, "Ooh, you shouldn't go back to your job at 6 weeks because it's not safe for you." We recognize that we have to go back to our job. So,
No shit, yeah.
uh,
We could do a whole 'nother hour on that in and of
oh,
itself.
oh yeah,
Ugh.
absolutely, absolutely.
Better
But
in Canada, right? You guys have it, like, pretty legit out there?
we have a 12 to 18-month maternity leave here that's subsidized by the government. Yeah. Yeah.
Come
Yeah. So,
on.
and that's the thing. Like, I do a lot of teaching in the US, and I can, if somebody wants to wait 6 weeks and do absolutely nothing from a fitness perspective in Canada because they're going to have the year to rebuild, that's totally fine. But in the United States, where a lot of people are getting 12 weeks is really good, especially if they're getting paid for some of that time. If you have an active job, you have to do some work hardening like you would if you had an injury at work to get
Mhm.
you back to be able to do workplace related activity. So there's a lot that goes into that conversation. And again, I did in a whole other podcast about how to start exercising before 6 weeks and started to really debunk a lot of this. Like, you have to do nothing. Like, our 6 week checkup is a medical clearance check, right? It's to make sure there's no lumps, bumps, infections, and everything from the external surface and on the scar is. And there's a lot of people who had a C-section who they never checked their vagina, even though they pushed for 2 hours and it ended up not requiring or not progressing. And then they had a C-section. So you had that pelvic floor injury,
Mhm.
but then you had a C-section and they don't check those people's pelvic floor. So, and this is because like the scope of the physician or provider is to look for medical safety. Like, that is the goal of that checkup. And I think we put a lot of pressure on our providers to give us all the information when that was not like what the scope of that appointment was. And
Right.
so how do we help our providers? How do we help them create bridges? I think is the question to have instead of being very negative. There's a lot of negativity online against a lot of birth providers for interventions or this or that or this decision making when we have to recognize their context, their scope of practice, their liability, like all of these other things that oftentimes we don't think about when we're making some of those calls. I don't know why I just went down that tangent, but
No, I
it was about
agree, I
spreadsheets.
agree. I think that it's really interesting, unless you're quite close to the medical field, it's really hard to understand the limitations of providers and what they're scoped to do and what they're trained to do and and like the layperson truly does not understand how that is. To the layperson, a doctor like knows everything about everything, right? Like they're a doctor. They know
Mhm.
everything. I can ask them about everything. And it wasn't until I married a pharmacist that I really had an understanding of like the docs don't really know shit about medicine and they're not supposed to and they don't have to. That's not their job. Like if someone needs a diagnosis, that's great. And then my husband will come in and be like, I think that this is the right medication at this dosage for this person. And he works quite literally works in doctors' offices to help them
Love that.
with those decisions. And he also sees patients who are dealing with like long-term issues like diabetes and things. Like he quite literally you
Love
can make an appointment to see your NP or your PA or your MD or your pharmacist
that.
because he would rather counsel people on their diet and lifestyle and not put them on pills. But that's neither here
Right.
nor there. Unless you're really close to the medical field, you don't really understand that your doc is supposed to do these 3 things and not these 30,000 things because even ROBs, they're treating pregnant people, but they're also treating like a myriad of other women going through different phases of their lives and things. And so it is really hard it is really hard to gain some perspective on what you need from them in that exact moment. 'Cause that also left my 6-week check being like, "That's fucking it? I am going crazy at home here, lady. And you just saw
Yeah.
me for 6 minutes being like, you don't need stitches, you look fine, get the hell out of here." I'm like,
Yeah.
and I remember being so livid. I'm like, "She didn't even ask me the name of my baby. Does she even care about me?" And Matt, my husband, was like, "She doesn't need to. That's not her job. Like, you're healing, you're a healthy young woman. Get out of my office. Like, I got sick people to deal with." You know what I mean? And that's, sorry, also a tangent, but same vibe. It's just really interesting when you look at the system as a whole as really what needs fixing. It's not just one thing or another. And it almost, honestly, the issues are so large, it almost is just easier to not deal with them, right?
Yeah. And the key word that you said was system. Like that's
Mhm.
the idea. Like the physicians and providers are working within a system that's supposed to help support them. And I feel like there's a lot of circumstances where they're not being supported. And so
Right.
having providers like pelvic floor physical therapists who are like, let me help you.
Yeah.
Like in Brazil, for example, there is a pelvic floor physical therapist at every maternity ward. It is, or and the idea is so that that's not the job of the obstetrician. Like it is the job of the pelvic floor physical therapist to start re-educating on pelvic floor and help with scar and stitch management and all the types of things, how to get a C-section scar moving. And then we have other bridges and like and the Barbell Mamas was meant to be the next bridge where we have our early postpartum work. And then when you're like, okay, I want to start moving, how do I respect where my pelvic floor and core is? Because also insurance reimbursements for pelvic PT is not that much. So they have to
Mhm.
see people every week or every 2 weeks. And they can't set up an entire program for every single person. They just don't have the time to do that. And it takes a long time. So then how do we create this bridge? And then how do we create this bridge to fitness so that people in our CrossFit communities can be doing this like for life and support their pelvic health and support their bone health and their joint health. Like,
Mhm.
how do we really create this system where there are resources across the line of everybody's life? But we're talking within the snapshot of pregnancy and postpartum for the female. But, this is really the way that we're going to create these long-standing changes in a person's health is by having them be supported. But if they're messaging during pregnancy and postpartum, you shouldn't lift heavy weights. Don't do this. This is dangerous for you. You're going to cause your organs to fall out. You're going to cause a permanent ab deformity, which is not true.
Mhm.
We are going to start having individuals who at the age of 30 start to become afraid of movement.
Right.
We do not have a movement problem. We have a lack of movement problem. And I really truly believe that for women, the idea that they should be afraid or nervous or tentative about exercise starts for many during this time
For sure.
because they're getting nervous and then they never really get back to where they were before. And then they get pregnant again. And then they feel less fit than they were before. And then this cascade can happen. And then you're busy with life. And then perimenopause starts to happen. And then we get into the postmenopausal period. And then we get afraid of broken bones and fractures. Like there's just so many things that create fear. And so, how do we stop that at the very beginning and say, you can be strong? Let me support you. Let me empower you with the education and the right buoys so that you can feel good with your decisions and know that there is someone in your corner to help you with
We
that.
We need referrals coming straight from the physicians. That's what we need. We need that nurse that I talked to 3 years ago when I was like, "How much can I lift?" Instead of being like, "We recommend pregnant women don't lift more than 25 pounds." We need, "Oh, here's a referral to a program called the Barbell Mamas, and we need insurance reimbursement on your end for you guys to take on more women and grow and expand your program with more providers to be able to be resources for them." Like, that's, we need that to start from within the system itself in order to
Yeah.
become normalized, and fuck those people who are like, "The exercise during pregnancy is dangerous."
So we have a lot of people on the Barbell Mamas from Europe because they have a wellness stipend.
Amazing.
So they
And
get a
let's spend
cover.
that.
So they get a cover during their pregnancy as part of their care. And so we just send them an invoice that kind of outlines and they've had it completely reimbursed, which is really cool. We're starting to see more European apps. So cool.
Man, we gotta get stuff changed. Good lord.
But I think creating connection, like you said, not just within your community, but within the birth provider space is how we do it. Like
Yeah.
there's just, this is like a random soapbox, but I see so much negativity online attacking obstetricians and attacking midwives and all this type of thing. And there's absolutely an accountability that has to happen when trauma or negative birth outcomes are there. But to generally say that all obstetricians are just interventionists that want to create this cascade of interventions, for example, that's never going to spark change. It's going to create defensiveness and it's going to create divisiveness. And I really do think that connection is where we can really thrive, right? Like
Yeah.
having podcasts like this where you and I are creating connection and we're talking and talking to other people. And then how can I help you advocate? Like when you had that person that said, don't lift more than 25 pounds, where I counsel is say, okay, I lift 200 pounds. Does that still apply to me?
Right.
Or I saw this research paper that was looking at heavy lifting during pregnancy that didn't see any bad outcomes. Can I share it with you and have a discussion about it? Like, how do I equip you with the questions to ask your provider? And then you can also say, hey, I know this pelvic floor physical therapist is doing this thing. I would love if, like, would it be okay if I go to them? And then these people start noodling on these conversations. They're like, maybe it shouldn't be like blanket statements. Like, there's so much learning that can happen from a space of connection than defensiveness that happens when we just blanket attack anybody. I hate blanket recommendations in general because it ruins the nuance. But yeah, there's just so much that we can do. And
Totally.
I'm just pumped to be a part of it. Like my goal is like, how do I create this research to help providers feel good about allowing individuals to be strong during their pregnancy?
Yeah. You could just go with the argument that Matt goes with every time. I wonder if I like push myself too hard or if I can do a thing or one thing or another thing. He's always like, I mean, the pregnant lion, when she's like 8 months pregnant, still has to go out hunting for her entire pack. So I think you can probably go for a 400-meter run and be okay. I'm like, "You make an excellent point, sir," when he's just like, "We're mammals, like, all mammals across this planet,
Yeah.
like, continue on with their daily activity and their daily stress levels while pregnant." Like,
Yeah.
there are no apes just, like, out there chilling at 7 months because someone told them that they can't climb trees anymore, like, that's not how it works, so
Right. And we don't have to be afraid of symptoms either. Like if we have a day where we do too many pull-ups and our shoulder feels a bit cranky, we don't ever say, "Oh, I've just ruined my shoulder joint forever."
right,
Right? But when we have a person that's peeing when they're doing double unders, like the idea is you're going to ruin your pelvic floor. And same thing postpartum, like we would never finish a surgery and say, "Oh, I expect you to have full range of motion, have all your function back, and you should never experience any pain after you get your cast off." No, we say like, "This is probably gonna hurt. We're really gonna have to push you into a position that your body is feeling very stiff in, but long term, it's gonna feel better."
right,
And so postpartum, I am not afraid if a person is leaking. It's giving me a sign of where their symptoms are. Am I gonna get them to continue pushing through them and completely disregard them? Absolutely not. But I am not afraid of your symptom. I actually wanna know where they are so that I can work on creating more resiliency and empower you to make that ceiling before you experience symptoms that much bigger.
and you know that they're not gonna stop. Like, that's the
Yeah.
other thing too, is, like, that us as athletes are not gonna be like, "Okay, this happened to me, and I'm, like, not gonna ever move again until we fix it perfectly." It's like, "No, I'm probably gonna go to the gym tonight again, so, like, I don't
Yeah.
really feel like peeing my pants a second time in a row, like, is there anything I can do differently? Because 'Cause I'm still going. Like, I'm still
Yes.
gonna go work out." You know what I
100%.
mean?
I'll
N
go with you.
perfect. Where can everyone find all of your things if they're interested in learning more, if they wanna become a part of it or listen to your show? Point us in the
Yeah.
right direction.
So the Barbell Mamas on Instagram. We have the Barbell Mamas podcast, which is on all of your Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of the jam. We also have some free resources on our website, thebarbellmamas.com. I did a webinar on returning to barbell training postpartum. We have some things like that. And we have a whole exercise library on modifying different things for different barbell
Yes.
movements that it's available. And we try and stay up to date with the blog as well around what to know about different pelvic floor conditions, like how to modify around this. So there's tons of resources on the website. We're just trying to create as much empowerment focused messages as we can. So that's where you can find all things the
That's
Barbell Mamas.
great. Christina, thank you so much for
I could
coming
talk to
and
you
chatting
forever
about
about
this.
this stuff.
Same. And I'm like, I know you'll be back because all of your other specialties honestly deserve their own episodes, but they really deserve their own like 10 episodes. But I love hearing what you're working on. And I love picking your brain on all this stuff because I just feel like you are the answer to what so many women in different stages of life are looking for. And I'm forever grateful that you didn't have it when you needed it so that you went out and made it. Truly. I'm sorry that you had to deal with it that way, but like I just feel like we're so very lucky that you have devoted so much of
Oh,
your
thank
brain
you.
space to this type of research for the betterment of all of us. And I'm like obsessed with you and what you do. So we
Aw,
will
you're
have
so
you
sweet.
back on the show again to
Can't
talk
wait.
about other things and other stages of life. And in the meantime, everyone, please check out the Barbell Mamas and reach out if you have any additional questions. And also, I say this at the end of every show, but I'm totally open to more topics and ideas and guests for these Focus on Female episodes. So if you have any ideas or recommendations or things you want to hear about, slide right into my DMs. I try to get to all of them when my baby's not like crying. I guess he's not a baby anymore. When my toddler is not like crying or demanding a snack or waking up in the middle of the night. So it gets
Motherhood
better,
training.
right? It gets better, right?
And then you do it again.
And then you do
Yeah,
it
when it
again.
gets
Right, of course.
when you do it again, yeah.
Ah, God,
I get
we're
you're
in it. We're in the thick of
you're the thick of it.
two right now. There's a lot of feelings. So, for everyone listening, thank you guys so much. Thank you for tuning into another one of these Focus on Female episodes, and we will chat with you guys soon.